They poured concrete into my private, fully permitted, professionally built well as if it were a toxic waste dump, all to protect their cookie-cutter paradise. At the center of this absurdity stood Meredith Sloan, the HOA president, clipboard in hand, and an inflated sense of superiority. She smiled smugly, acting as though she had saved the neighborhood from any sign of independent thought. She called it a necessary precaution. I, however, saw it as a declaration of war, and I don't lose wars, especially when pettiness is weaponized in yoga pants. If you've ever had a run-in with an HOA that believes it's above the law, you'll relate. But let me backtrack a bit. Let me show you how this nightmare began 6 months ago. I had just moved to Riverside Heights after selling my consulting business, and I was looking for peace. This beautiful, quiet community of 50 homes nestled in the Colorado Springs foothills seemed perfect. I bought my $800,000 home in cash, no mortgage, no debt, because I wanted a life focused on my freelance engineering projects. I'm a civil engineer specializing in water and drainage systems for luxury resorts and high-end developments. After years of dealing with corporate chaos, I decided to go freelance. It turned out to be the best decision of my career. I was pulling in 6 figures while working fewer hours, designing systems that actually mattered. The first thing I did after moving in was build the perfect well. Not just any well, but a masterpiece, a testament to everything I knew about sustainable water systems. It wasn't just functional, it was beautiful. LED lights lit up the water at night, creating a serene blue glow. An automated control panel monitored water quality every second. The granite rim caught the sunlight during the day and at night. It looked like something out of a luxury resort. This well wasn't just a project for me. It was the first thing I had ever truly owned. It represented everything I stood for: innovation, self-reliance, and doing things the right way, even if it costs more. I felt proud standing next to it, drinking the cleanest water I'd ever tasted. It was the moment I realized I had found my place in the world. That's when I met Meredith Sloan. She showed up at my door 3 days after I finished the well, carrying a basket of overpriced cookies and wearing an outfit that screamed, "I have nothing better to do than judge my neighbors." She was 42, recently divorced from some high-powered Denver lawyer, and had used her $2.5 million settlement to buy the most expensive house in the neighborhood. What I didn't know was that Meredith was used to being the center of attention. Back when she was a trophy wife, she organized charity events and social clubs. Losing that status in a messy public divorce had left her clinging to whatever control she could get her hands on. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm Meredith, the HOA president." She made a point to inspect my well, slowly circling it, her expression shifting from curiosity to something more like envy. "You're an architect?" she asked. "Civil engineer," I replied, pulling up the monitoring app on my phone to show her the real-time water quality data. I design water systems for luxury resorts. Her interest seemed genuine at first, but then her tone shifted. "That's interesting. You know, here in Riverside Heights, we really value simplicity. Harmony with the community." That's when I felt the first warning bell. Harmony with nature, I thought, was a good thing, but this was something different. "I meant harmony with the community," she clarified. "We like things to flow smoothly around here." I didn't think much of it at the time. I still believed she was just a quirky neighbor, perhaps a little too obsessed with the HOA. I proudly demonstrated the real-time monitoring on my phone, showing her the pH, temperature, and purity of the water. But her expression shifted. She crossed her arms, and the jealousy was palpable. "Very impressive," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure all this technology makes you feel quite special." "It's not about feeling special," I explained, defensive. "It's about sustainability and water independence. This system could serve as a model for the community." That was the wrong thing to say. "Independence," she repeated slowly, her eyes narrowing. "That's an interesting word choice. Here in Riverside Heights, we believe in interdependence, community standards, working together toward common goals." As she turned to leave, she added, "Oh, Mason, there's an HOA meeting next week. You should definitely attend." Her words were a thinly veiled warning, not a friendly invitation. I watched her walk back to her pristine, perfectly landscaped house. Exactly like every other house on the block, except hers was better. If I had known then what I know now, I would have started recording everything. Because Meredith Sloan was about to turn my peaceful life into a living nightmare, simply because I dared to create something beautiful and independent in her tightly controlled little kingdom. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a dull, beige room that sucked the life out of the air. I thought it would be the usual meeting about lawn care and mailbox regulations. But instead, it felt like an ambush. Meredith stood at the front, holding a thick folder of papers, her cold smile intact. "Before we discuss the regular agenda," she said, "I'm pleased to announce some important new community guidelines that were approved last week." As she read through the list of new rules, each one felt like a direct attack on my well. The lights, the plants, even the well itself, everything I had built was being targeted. The room was silent, and I realized that every person there knew exactly what was happening. No one defended me. No one spoke up. They were all too afraid of Meredith. I stood up. "Excuse me, but I object to these retroactive regulations. I followed all the existing HOA rules and obtained proper permits when I built my well. Changing the rules after the fact seems problematic." The room remained silent. Not a single person supported me. It was clear they were all intimidated by Meredith. She dismissed my concerns, saying, "I'm sure you understand, Mason. We need to maintain the safety and appropriateness of the community." Safety? My well exceeded safety standards. But I couldn't get anyone to see that. Meredith was relentless. After the meeting, I approached her, hoping for a resolution. "I don't want trouble," I said calmly. "I just want to live peacefully. Can we find a way to work this out?" Her response dripped with false sweetness. "Of course, we can work it out. All you have to do is follow the rules like everyone else." But these rules didn't exist when I built the well. You can't just change them to target one person. "We've evolved," Meredith said, giving me a condescending smile. "Our standards have to evolve too. I'm sure a smart engineer like you can figure out how to adapt." She meant surrender. I left that meeting knowing I was in for a fight, but I still believed reason would prevail. I was wrong. That night, I found my first violation notice on the door, $75 per day fine for unauthorized decoration visible from the street. The decoration was my solar panel. They were targeting anything I had that stood out. Meredith launched a full-scale harassment campaign against me, issuing violation after violation. My neighbor's lights stayed up all summer untouched, but I was fined for every little thing. I realized that Meredith wasn't interested in compromise. She wanted submission. The war for my independence had begun. I started to notice Meredith Sloan, the HOA president, lurking around my property with a measuring tape and magnifying glass, looking for any possible violation. Meanwhile, she completely ignored identical or even worse violations at other homes. Determined to fight back, I began documenting everything with photos and timestamps, carefully building a case file to show the clear targeting. Take my neighbor across the street, for example. He kept Christmas lights up year-round, violating at least 3 HOA rules, but he never received a single notice. Then, there was the house next door to his, which had a garden twice the size of mine, with vegetables growing right up to the property line. Apparently, that was perfectly fine. Meanwhile, I was slapped with a $75 fine for hanging a towel to dry and another $100 fine for tomatoes that were technically 6 inches too close to my fence. By the end of the 3rd week, I had accumulated over $1,200 in fines, each for violations so trivial they would have been ignored at any reasonable property. I tried calling the HOA management company, hoping to speak with someone logical, but I was told that all enforcement decisions went through Meredith, giving her absolute control over my life. I sought legal help from a local attorney specializing in HOA disputes, but he declined to take my case after a phone call with someone he said understands the local landscape very well. That's when I realized Meredith's network extended far beyond our neighborhood. As the ex-wife of a well-known Denver lawyer, she had connections throughout the legal and business communities, connections that allowed her to avoid challenges, even when her behavior was clearly harassment. It became clear Meredith had perfected the art of abusing a system designed to maintain community standards. Every day brought a new interpretation of the rules, all conveniently applying only to my property. Meanwhile, she maintained her sweet, concerned neighbor act whenever other residents were around. The breaking point came when Mrs. Peterson, my elderly neighbor, slipped a handwritten note into my mailbox late one evening. She looked around nervously before approaching me, whispering, "Be careful, dear." I heard Meredith on the phone talking about environmental concerns and emergency measures. She's researching ways to have your well declared a contamination risk. She's found something that could force you to shut it down. Please be careful. Mrs. Peterson had lived in the community for 15 years and had never seen anything like Meredith's targeted attacks. I started taking her behavior more seriously and began researching HOA law and property rights in Colorado. What I learned was both alarming and eye-opening. While HOA boards have significant power to enforce their rules, they also have legal obligations to treat all residents fairly and base their decisions on legitimate community interests. Meredith's clear targeting and retroactive rulemaking could be challenged, but only if I could prove a pattern of harassment and document her true motivations. Unfortunately, she was clever enough to hide her real agenda behind her talk of community standards and safety concerns. Then, while researching municipal water regulations, I came across something that changed everything. A clause buried in the city contract that supplied water to our community. It stated that the service agreement was subject to review and potential suspension in cases of verified environmental violations or noncompliance with municipal standards. That's when it clicked. If Meredith could somehow create an environmental emergency related to my well, she could not only force me to shut it down, but also position herself as the hero who saved the community from a dangerous neighbor. One morning, I woke up to the sound of heavy machinery outside my bedroom window. At first, I thought it was just road construction or utility work. But as I became more alert, I realized the noise was coming from my front yard. I threw on some clothes and rushed outside to find 2 concrete trucks parked in my driveway and 3 workers in hard hats standing around my well. My beautiful granite-rimmed well had been wrapped in plastic sheeting and marked with a bright yellow "Danger, Do Not Approach" sign, looking official enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, running toward the workers who were already setting up their pumping equipment. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more wild HOA stories and other exciting content. Click the bell icon so you never miss an update. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had an HOA experience like mine? Share your stories below.